What's up, everybody? It's Mark from 403 Fauna, along with
Jason Radass Designs.
this is the Fauna topic, where every week we talk about relevant topics to the ball python and reptile industry. Now, this week we're gonna veer off a little bit from the ball pythons and just talk about some news in the reptile world. Of course, we'll talk about our week and everything, but let's go ahead and get the show started. So this is FNN, the Fauna News Network. Now, originally, when I wanted to do this show, I think I've talked about this before, but the whole Back Rack podcast was my inspiration with Jessica and gosh, I already forgot her name, but one of my
Jana King.
Jana King, yeah. So their news segment was one of my favorite parts of their show, and I wanted to create a show just on reptile news. Now it's kind of been light on the news lately. There's been a lot of drama before, but for us right now in the ball python industry, it's all about people that are just getting out of the hobby and little topics like, is sunset a project worth getting into? But there hasn't been anything major. But this week, a topic came up that crossed my path and pretty much everyone's path. But before we get into that, let's do our weekly check-in. Give me a second here. Okay, so go ahead, Jason. How was your week with ball pythons, or in general, whatever you want to talk about your week?
Um, yeah, it was a good week. It was a busy work week yesterday, and I don't advise anyone do this. But I went to work on 0 hours sleep,
Wow.
which I haven't done since I couldn't even. I don't even remember, a long, long time ago. And yeah, so I came home yesterday. I actually had a pretty good day at work, and then I came home. I was just wiped out. So I'm mostly recovered now. Um, and I just been doing research and got some rodent food, and that's about it. Yeah, it's pretty mellow week.
Did you get any pairings in this week?
No, no, I did have a snake arrive in the mail that I would have liked to have shown, but he's like deep in shed. And then even more so, 2 days later today, he's looks like a zombie. So, just keeping him moist, and then once I get him acclimated, I will throw him into the breeding program.
All right. Male or female?
Male. Male, super super cool looking, super huge. My friend up in Northern California sent him to me. Super super cool, and yeah, I look forward to him shedding. And I'll show you guys when he sheds.
We'll save it for the rat ass snake of the week some other time.
Yeah.
Yeah, my workday was pretty crazy today, and um, actually, I was 15 minutes before this show was starting. I was heading out the door, and I realized, oh my gosh, wait a second, we got a show that we got to do. But that's
Oh
just
yeah, I have a weekly podcast.
yeah. This week, or actually today, our girls basketball team was at the state finals, and
Nice.
they lost. We watched it in class actually, and it was a really close one, and we're proud of them. And we had that, and then we had a career fair here at school. So it's just been a busy day, and I almost forgot that we had this show.
Yeah, sports can be all encompassing. I used to, when I was younger and starting in with reptiles, it probably coincided with that time frame. I worked for the cable company, and doing video film work um, for like a local cable access channel, and we would do coverage of high school games and college games. Sometimes in big arenas like Oakland Coliseum, different places. And I remember one of my favorite teams that we covered locally at one point during the 5 years that I was there. Um, had the same high school name as the school that you're at, and they
Yeah,
made it to the state finals. And it was super exciting. I think we went to Arco Arena in Sacramento to play
yeah,
it,
that
if
was
I
the one our team was at. Yeah,
yeah, it was super exciting, and same school name, probably same final score. They lost just barely in the end, and oh man, you could just feel the pain
yeah,
of the students to have had such an exciting year and oh man, drain like most of their threes and be so good, and then it just the pressure right at the end just against the best competition just to fall short, but those are some of the lessons in life, and
yeah,
it was an exciting run.
correct. Well, in regards to ball pythons this week, I didn't get any pairings in, but some of my young males that missed a meal, they started eating again, which is super cool. And I think I mentioned last week that my lace started locking. And I don't know if you caught Justin's video today. Did you watch Justin's video today?
No, I thought to myself, oh, I should watch this right now and maybe it'll get mentioned. I didn't watch that one.
Oh my gosh, the lace that he's coming out with is amazing. Like
Hmm.
these colors, it's crazy. But I'll let you watch that. But I'm glad that he's locking, especially after seeing that video, which was based on lace. I I did sell two snakes this week, so
Nice.
finally got my Morph Market up running in, and right before I posted on Morph Market, I actually put it on an Instagram story. I said, if anyone's interested, ask me how much this snake costs. And I got two messages, and one of them was from Randy from Dark Cloud, and it was a banana triple het for clown, VPI, and genetic stripe. And Randy hooked me up with snakes before, and I just had to give him a deal. So I gave him a price that he couldn't refuse. So he snapped that up. And
Nice.
I put on hold on Morph Market. And then someone the next morning said, "Oh man, I shouldn't have slept on that decision. Do you have any more?" And I actually had five females from that clutch, and it had pastel in it. And I gave him a pastel discount, and he decided to buy that. So that was a nice little pull up on my bank account.
Can I borrow some money, Mark? That's
and,
awesome. That's
and
great.
it's funny because whenever you get money like that, it's like, what can I spend it on? And there was some stuff I needed for, like, I bought a used rack, Reptiles Basics, and I want to replace the heat tape on that. So I bought some heat tape and some tubs and
Mhm,
stuff like that. And another story that I'll get into when we talk about our page one Morph Market auction.
mhm.
But let's get to our shout out of the week this week. For those of us in the audience here, what's up to Genomic, Natalie, and Phil? Remember that if you get this answer correct, you'll get a shout out on your own. So last week it was Cuddle Time Critters. Billy actually got the answer first, but he was kind enough to defer it because there's probably nothing that I'll produce that he needs. But Melissa from Cuddle Time Critters was the one who got the answer correct and is our shout out of the week. She's really supportive of the community. She's been on podcasts and she's always in lives in the chat. And she was actually on the holdback rack this morning. I found it funny because two of our previous winners here, High Viz and Cuddle Time Critters, they were both on the holdback rack, one yesterday and one today. So maybe if you win, you're going to be on the holdback rack podcast. It seems to be the trend here.
We have a deal worked out with Jessica.
Yes.
I watched that full episode, and it was a good one.
Cool.
It was long.
I saw you in, I caught a little bit of the two peens in a podcast last night, and I saw that you were in the chat there. And afterward, I looked at how long it was, and it was like a 7-hour podcast. Like, wow, those guys were going off.
I don't think it was that long. It felt like maybe a couple hours. They had some technical difficulties.
Okay.
I've been anticipating them coming out with their podcast for months now, and sometimes life gets in the way and coordinating things, and they both have busy lives. But they're among the funnier people that you will meet in the hobby. So,
Yeah, very entertaining.
it's important to entertain people. We all just want to have fun, right? So I love Andrew and Jacob. They have good reputations, and they have nice collections that they've built and made some cool stuff happen and made some cool snakes. And so yeah, I tuned in for that, and it was a learning lesson intro episode, but they're gonna be killing it. I'm sure soon as they just you know gain experience in that field.
There's been so many great podcasts coming out. Antoine from High Desert Python, he has a really good podcast, and there's us, of course, but but there's a lot of content out there for everyone to get into. Hey, just a reminder, if you win this question, of course you get the shout out, but you also become eligible for the snake giveaway that I'm going to do this year, and I promise you it's going to be a good one. I haven't, you know, produced eggs yet, but there's definitely locks going on and good signs, so it's going to be a good one. I see Jason in the chat here. He already won one, so Jason, unfortunately, you're not eligible for this, but feel free to answer because it can help someone else answer it. So Natalie, Phil, if you're still there, and a couple more people hiding who haven't said hello yet. Here is our question of the week. Now, this time it's not going to be a multiple choice question, so feel free to just type the answer in the chat. So, problem of the week: what do these animals have in common? The garter snake, platypus, Komodo dragon, and the slow loris. So, have you ever had a garter snake, Jason? I'm sure we all have at some point.
Just catching them in the wild, and then like keeping them and then taking them back to the spot that I was fishing or whatnot. Um, it's cool that they'll their diet is good. I'll say that. And I one time found a San Francisco garter snake that are like brilliantly an aqua type color with red, and
Right.
they're protected in Northern California. So I just like checked them out while I was fishing and let them go. But yeah, garter snakes are cool.
Yeah, my first snake was a garter snake in high school, and I love that little thing. He would eat goldfish and guppies and stuff like that. I probably wasn't taking super good care of that. That was the late 80s, early 90s. But he was super tame, and I heard garter snakes weren't. And actually, at one point, my friend had a garter snake too, and it wasn't as tame as the one I had, but it looked really nice. And so I traded it for him, and I regretted that decision because I was never able to tame down that new snake. But I, I learned recently on a podcast, maybe it was the Holdback Rack podcast, and Phil got this answer correct, by the way, in that they're all venomous. I was surprised that garter snakes recently was discovered that they are venomous, and
Hmm.
obviously it's not enough to harm us, but to the little animals that they eat, it is. And
That's the
also,
first that's the first that I've ever heard
yeah,
that. I've been bitten by garter snakes before. It did nothing but make me laugh or be surprised. But some of these things can be, figured out in the lab, so to speak. And I would love to read a paper on that.
yeah. So I just learned that last week. So finger snakes, you're gonna get your shout out next week. You're eligible for the snake giveaway. Jason said they all lay eggs. Well, the slow loris is a mammal, so it does not lay eggs. What's up, Carissa? And Phil says that they give you itchy bites. Now, what I also found fascinating is the slow loris. When I was coming up with this question, I was like looking at various venomous animals that people wouldn't know were venomous. Of course, we all know platypus and Komodo dragon, but the slow loris, really interesting. It's a primate, and in the under armpits, it has a gland that produces this chemical that when mixed with saliva makes a poison. And so if he feels threatened, he'll start licking under his arm. And if he bites you with that saliva mixed with that chemical, it turns into a venom, man.
That's awesome.
So congrats to Phil Snyder for being our shout out of the week next week and being eligible for the snake giveaway.
Yeah, good job, Phil.
Okay, it's time for your snake of the week. Jason, let's see what you got.
Yeah, this week it won't be a snake. This week it will be a lizard of the week
Ooh.
because of the topics that we're covering and because some of the snakes that I wanted to potentially show are deep in shed and not very showable. So now around the very end, like December of 1997, I bought the second reptile that I ever owned, and it was a leopard gecko from a little pet store called Critters at the time. And she was just a nice, regular looking Leo. And that gecko lived for 20 plus years as a female that was bred after I had her about 2 years. And I bred her at different times. Like, I didn't just want her to be like an egg producing factory and then likely not live as long.
Mhm.
So she was paired throughout her life at different times until like the last like 5, 6, 7, 8 years. She wasn't paired anymore, but she was paired a bit here and there in the beginning. And I got all these wild reptiles since the pandemic and rejoining the hobby, and um, Natalie doesn't have any, and she, she has dogs and she has an interest in reptiles, but doesn't own any herself. Just kind of helps me here and there. And there's some that I have that she shares that she really appreciates, like our biggest ball python, Bertha. She really likes a lot. But I could tell that she would be interested in a leopard gecko. And at the last Pomona show, woo, I picked up this gecko from JMG. Works with all the hogs, all the
Mhm.
hognose snakes, and him and his father bred lots of really cool leopard geckos and fat-tailed geckos over the years and have come up with new genes and lines. And he had all these affordable leopard geckos and said they weren't breeding them as much anymore.
I love how his
And
toes are white. That's cool.
and you, if I mean, I don't know if anyone can really guess the genes in this. It's not so much in leopard geckos as being like heterozygous for like certain things like albinism or you know leucistic or whatnot. It's more so the selective breeding of various lines of geckos um, year after year leads to all these traits. I mean, my gecko was really pretty, my original gecko. Um, and the offspring that I made over the years with the different stuff I bought were really cool and got nicer and nicer. But a gecko like this back in the day that had like somewhat of like a carrot tail and tangerine like would have been like one of the coolest geckos there was. And now they've had so many generations of leopard geckos that it's it's like whatever. They're just all wild looking. Um,
Yeah, I'm not familiar at all with gecko morphs, but I'm going to say tangerine. I think I may have heard that before.
yeah, I mean that's essentially what it is. Is people bred them to be more orange, and as they started to get really nice, labeled them tangerine. And people have taken different ones from different countries and different lines, and they're essentially all tangerines, but people will call them all these wild names.
It's cutie.
This is Natalie named her Durka.
You have any plans to get into breeding leopard geckos?
I don't know. That's up to Natalie. I don't know if she'll be into that. Um, I've bred plenty of leopard geckos. The first reptile I ever hatched was a leopard gecko, two of them, and they came out of the eggs screaming like little velociraptors, and I will never forget it. It was so rewarding and so much fun and fascinating, and I've bred lots of different species of geckos over the years, common and super ultra rare, and I still appreciate eublepharid geckos, which are varieties of geckos that have blinking eyelids. Um, everything on North America, desert banded geckos and different things all have that ability. I just think that they're super cute. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But yeah. Gecko of the week.
Very nice. And I know that's on topic for this week, so we'll get into
Yeah.
that. Okay, so we're gonna check out page 1 of the Morph Market auctions. I got an interesting story to tie into that. Let me pull that up. Have you done your auction for the month yet?
Nope. I think I got a little bit of like a note on Morph Market saying, "Hey, use the rest of your auction spots if you want before it rolls over." I just don't have a lot available at the moment, and I considered doing one, but I'm just waiting for a little bit. But I watch the auctions. I
It's
watch the
fun.
auctions.
I watch them too. And it's funny because at the beginning of this month, I've tuned into the auctions. Boom, 450 auctions. I was like, whoa, does this start at the beginning of the month? And apparently so. And I've started my Morph Market. I got the middle plan, I think, and I'm not
Mhm,
sure how many auctions I got, but I think I'm going to start or at least put up one for auction. But
mhm,
I saw Brandon Nixon from Nixon's Reptiles. He posted on his story on Instagram that he had on auction a spider double het monsoon desert ghost male, and
mhm.
that interests me. I'm not big into the spider gene, but the fact that it was a double het monsoon desert ghost piqued my interest, and especially seeing the price that it was listed at only 2 hours from it ending, it was like at $230. I'm like, that's criminal
Hmm.
to let that snake go. I actually messaged Brandon. I said, I'm gonna bid it up to $500, and so I bumped it up to $500 just like that. And hey, if I won it at $500, I'd be pretty happy with that.
Mhm.
And of course, that person bid it up to $505. Like, oh my god, those $5 bids kill me.
I got
And
5 on it.
I was like, 600, because on these auctions, and I saw someone post on Instagram, it gets that competitive spirit flowing. And for me personally, if I bid on an auction, I know my price point, and my price point for that was the what I sold for snakes. This was gonna bump it up to there, and eventually I bumped it up to 700, I think,
Woo!
and then that person bumped it to 705, and I was like, okay, you could have it at 705. But I almost thought about bringing it up to 1,000 just because of that competition, but I held back on that. But someone got a really good deal on a double het monsoon desert ghost, And I've got desert ghost females ready to breed now, and
Hmm.
it would have been perfect to go in the plan, but I didn't want to push it too far.
Yeah, Mark, I've overbid and overpaid and overwon on eBay auctions before. That's probably partially why I'm not on eBay very often anymore. But it is exciting, and that snake would have had potential. He got that snake from Brock Wagner. Did you say that already?
Yeah.
That's there's possibilities there. It would have been an interesting acquisition. I don't have any spider in my collection. When I purchased that one collection locally, there was a spider in it, a banana spider, and he didn't have very much wobble, and he was big and he was very unique looking. And the spider gene, as it combines with other genes in ball pythons, can make some very unique looking snakes, very striking looking snakes. It's very hard to pull off without that gene, but I don't expect, bless you, I don't expect to ever acquire another spider, although I have been tempted a couple times, mainly when the Aaron of Beast Morphs um, started hatching sunsets. He had some spider sunsets, and he had some of them had OD in them, and they actually were really cool looking, and I liked them, and I considered that a little bit. The interesting thing I'll say just really quickly about spider, from what I've noticed, just from hearing from other people, right, is that they actually, even though they have this defect and they have these issues sometimes to varying degrees, are reported to be like really good eaters
Mhm.
and especially good breeders. I think that's a really interesting quirk that I don't completely have understood. Um, why that would be, but it's unlikely I'll ever get a spider because, like leopard geckos that are so hardy of a species as they've come into the country for decades and decades and decades. Um, Now as I come back in the hobby, they have all sorts of issues, from line breeding and bottlenecking and people breeding for certain looks, and there's lines of leopard geckos that have tumors, that have neurological issues and spin around like the worst spider you've seen, and deformities and all sorts of things that in my soul makes me want to cry a little bit. Yeah, I don't even really want to even talk about it. It's really sad. And so I just can't partake in something like that. But there are spiders out there and they need good homes, and a lot of them are really really beautiful snakes. So um you know I don't have a problem with people doing it. I just don't think that I will ever own one.
Yeah, at this point, I don't plan on, but if something like that popped up and if I won that for $500, I would have been happy.
Yeah, I
But
know that he paid a lot more
yeah,
for that snake than it sold for. I know that. I remember when that snake was originally posted by Brock. So sometimes that's the chance you have to take. And um, lots of people that got into the monsoon project in the last couple of years have done so more affordably because there was spider in it. And the Mojave 66% het monsoon male that I have and enjoy so much, grew so fast. His mom was a spider het monsoon, and um, his brother was a spider monsoon, a spider pastel monsoon, and
how did that look?
Uh, like a gene stacked animal,
Oh, okay.
like you don't want Monsoon to look. But he paid whatever he paid for those animals, and he raised them. and he did create monsoons, and he's, there, I think only, one of the heads was a spider, and look like your traditional spider, and sometimes that's what you have to do, like when Leviathan snakes, we talked about the auctions early on many episodes ago, got into the Nyala project. They did so with an animal that had spider in it, and sometimes those are the risks that we have to take, and I'm not hating on spider. I just ethically, I just feel like I want to avoid it. But every once in a while, like I said already, I'll see a snake posted on like Instagram or somewhere, and it'll just be just wild looking. And there's no way to produce that other than having that gene included. Um,
Mhm.
so interesting.
Okay, so let's get to the meat of our presentation today, and that is the Fauna News Network. Now, we've got two stories we'll be covering. I'll be covering the first story, and then Jason will be covering the second one. Now, this story was brought up, and I didn't see much coverage come across my Instagram. I'm not very active on Facebook, but maybe it's because I'm on deal mainly with ball pythons. But I saw that someone died from a Gila monster bite, and I thought that was pretty big news. It's crazy to
Hmm.
think about that. At some point, I thought of getting into Gila monsters or Mexican beaded lizards because they're really cool. But
Hmm.
I've got a rule for myself that I'm not going to keep any animals that could potentially do some harm to me. And I decided on that early on. When I started teaching, I wanted to have reptiles in my classroom that were safe to have around students. So the first thing I did was research on which make great classroom pets, and ball pythons, leopard geckos, bearded dragons, blue tongue skinks back in the early 2000s were the big things and were safe animals. And that was something considered. But even when I was younger, I wanted a berm. I wanted a retic. It seems like they're beautiful animals, and you don't realize how big they get when you see that cute little animal at the reptile show. And I know at Pomona, someone walks around with a very huge Mexican beaded lizard that apparently he lets people hold out there. And if people want to hold it, that's their prerogative. But man, I will personally not hold a venomous animal like that. I'd be okay with the retic or berm to hold, not to keep. But I don't know about the venomous animals. And reading through this story, so what happened was a man in Colorado, 34-year-old. I heard the name because I have a buddy in Colorado who had the same name, but this man was younger than him, so I had to double check the age of the guy. But his name was Christopher Ward, which I know
Hmm.
there's another Chris Ward in the ball python community, but it was not that person. But he's a 34-year-old guy, and he had two Gila monsters as pets. And he bought one at a reptile show, and he bought one from a breeder. And the city that he lived in Colorado, it was not legal to keep them.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if he was aware of that or not, because there are other cities in Colorado that it is legal to keep. But it's important that us as keepers know the rules in the city that we live in. And the story of it was told by his girlfriend. She heard a scream. And when she went into the room, the lizard was latched onto his hand. And at that point, he was shaking violently and shortly after threw up. So it was almost like an immediate response to the venom of the Gila monster. Now, Gila monsters usually don't kill people. I heard it's a really painful bite, though. Someone described it as getting their hand slammed on a car door, and that doesn't sound very pleasant. And if you look at the picture that I have here of the Gila monster, their head is like really wide. I imagine they do have a lot of muscles to control their jaws, and when they bite to envenomate their prey, they actually shake their head back and forth. So it's got to be a really painful bite, really strong bite. And once they latch on, they really don't let go. So he was hospitalized and he died just 4 days after that bite. So they might think it's got to be some sort of underlying condition with him or an allergic reaction that occurred, because people usually don't die from that, but it does not sound like a very pleasurable experience. Now, have you had any experience yourself with venomous or very large snakes that can harm you?
I've had breeder friends in years past that kept some of them bred Gila monsters. And so I've seen actually some like really pretty Gila monsters that were essentially like salmon pink with high
They're gorgeous.
contrasting like pitch black markings that were just like, man, and they're smaller than beaded lizards. Beaded lizards are pretty chunky. They're like a savanna monitor.
Mhm.
But Gila monsters are like the same thing in a cuter little package. So a little bit easier to house and feed. And I view them as similar to like varanids, where you're going to give them a diet that closely resembles that, and they are intelligent. They're very elusive and reclusive in the wild. And yeah, I've been around venomous reptiles. I don't know if I mentioned the story to you or the show in the past where I worked with so many geckos, and I had a friend that I used to work at a pet store with, and he moved away to Humboldt, California, really pretty in the redwoods. And I would go up there to visit him, and we would go in on purchases from like Glades Herbs, where, like in Florida, and they would just distribute out all the cool Madagascar species and different things from around the world. And we would go in on like a batch of like satanic leaf tail geckos and then like split them up and argue over the prettiest one. And back then you used to be able to get stuff pretty affordably. And he one time when I visited him took me to a friend's house. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's go hang out. And his buddy had all sorts of venomous stuff apparently. And we're sitting in the living room. I'm in a house that I've never been in before. I don't know this person. He's a friend of a friend, and he comes into the living room, and I'm just like chilling. He has two snake hooks, and he puts in the middle of the living room. I'm on the couch. My buddy's on the couch. He comes in and sets down in the middle of the living room on the floor an albino cobra. I was like, okay,
Crazy.
that's pretty cool looking. And I wasn't super frightened. Once I'm in like life or death situations, I kind of um, I feel like I've been in quite a few of them. I feel like I react pretty well. Keep my wits about me, and the snake he was used to, and it wasn't going crazy and after people all over the place like a black mamba or something. But I've known lots of people that just the allure of venomous reptiles is exciting to them. And I've had lots of friends where I would go to their houses in California, and there's people that like for many decades now, there's people that have like an affinity for pit vipers or rattlesnakes and like to collect all of them like Pokemon. And this is like a dwarf one from the middle of the country, and this is a rock rattlesnake. It's different looking and banded and gray and from Arizona or New Mexico or wherever. And there's a lot of different kinds of rattlesnakes, and you would go to those people's houses, and that's mostly all that they would keep. And I don't know. There's like, I'm not super scared of rattlesnakes, but I have a healthy respect for them, and I hear that rattle, and there's an allure. It's interesting, but I know that that's not something that I want to risk. I've only ever had like three snakes ever get out of their cages. One was a rosy boa, and then I found it in between a bookshelf and a wall later in the day from searching for it. And then I had a California king snake get out of a cage that was locked. I don't know how it got out to this day. It doesn't physically make sense. But it teleported out of its cage and made it into an upstairs bathroom of a house that I was in that somehow had a hole under like a cabinetry or something that it just found it immediately and was going to go into the walls of the house. And I go, I'm searching everywhere for my snake, and it's like 2 year size, kind of like a sub adult. And I got the last few inches of it going through this hole. It's like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose my snake to this house. Like I like slowly, I don't want to hurt it, but I don't want it to get into the walls either. And it's luckily somehow I coaxed it out without any, injury, and put it back in its cage and then reevaluated everything. I think I even put that cage in like a bigger aquarium for a little while, but I don't know what happened, how it escaped. And then here we have two snakes in our living room in big 4x2x2 cages, and the glass on the bottom cage, it's a showcase cage. Uh, our Mojave ball python can push it open. And I mean, actually, can see right now the lock's not even on it. I was in there the other night, but but I went to work and Natalie got her and put her back. I Even though I have a pretty good track record for not having too much get out, and I've never lost an animal for good, including day geckos, including tarantulas, including mice. But I just don't think that it's a risk that I'm willing to take. Now, I'm not like crapping on people in the hobby that really enjoy venomous, and there's some people that do it ever so responsibly and enjoy it, but it's just not something that I'm into. And I've held rear fanged venomous snakes at distributors and major like pet stores, like private pet stores. And I mean, even hognose snakes are
Hmm.
rear fanged and mildly venomous. And there have been people that have had some pretty serious reactions. I've seen pictures, I've heard accounts, but generally that doesn't happen. Now, I want to take over your story. I'm blabbing here. But like for instance, my mom is allergic to bee venom. So she has to go around with like a little pill vial and be prepared if she were to ever like get stung by a bee. I'm not like overly allergic to it. But that is likely what happened in the case with this guy and his pet Gila monster, because I've talked to numerous people that have kept Gila monsters, been bitten by them, and explain the stories to me. And me, I ask a lot of questions. Well, what was it like? How did it feel? When did it heal? And people will tell me that it feels like fire. Your hand is on fire for usually 2 full days.
Oh my God.
That's what it's described to me like. And and like Gila monsters do not inject venom. Uh they have like grooves like in their teeth where they like excrete more of like almost like a venomous saliva. They do have glands, but they don't inject you. They more bite you, and their teeth are designed to do a little bit of tearing and grooving in just such a way that the venom seeps in. And that's how that works. And I have not been bitten by one, so I can't tell you guys. I used to keep a lot of tarantula species, and I never, in the thousands and thousands and thousands of tarantulas that I've owned, ever been bit by one. I had a little feisty one that was a known species to be really angry, that I raised up somebody's whole clutch. I just bought the whole clutch from them. And and it I would hold them, and when they get up to like I don't know, inch and a half size, it started trying to bite me on my hand. I'm like, oh, aren't you cute? And then I was like, well, okay, well, I won't hold them anymore. And some people hold all sorts of like the meaner ones that are known to be really especially feisty and not trustworthy. But I've never been bitten by one. I owned 8 different species of scorpions in my time in the hobby, and I've never been stung by one. But I did almost get stung by a desert hairy scorpion from Arizona that was huge. And she had babies, and they were on her back. And I wanted to count them. I wanted to count them and check them out. And she whipped out her tail in this little tiny, it's like a 5-gallon aquarium with like sand in it and dirt. And she whipped her tail out backwards, not forwards, but backwards in reverse of her, straight out, so fast, so quick. It hit the glass and made this super loud sound and almost got me. It was like so close. And I was like, whoa. But most scorpions, I can just pick them up and put them on their hand. I had to get over my fears of those kinds of creatures when I was I don't know, like 20. And but yeah, I would imagine that that's what happened in the case with this guy, that he had an allergic reaction. There's certain tarantulas that could envenomate you, and there's reports of intense like fever and vomiting and sweats. And it probably was not a fun 4 days for him, sadly.
Yeah, crazy. I believe he was in a coma for those 4 days as well.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah, I personally am not going to mess with the venomous, but I do respect those that love that and want to do that. Okay, let's move on to the second story here, and I'm gonna let you take this one,
Hmm.
and that is Dubia versus Wiccan's Wicked Reptiles. So tell us about what's going on here.
Well, I'd imagine you've heard some of the rustlings in the hobby. There's unfortunately a lot of cancel culture has developed. That's such a harsh term, but sometimes you'll see that kind of thing take place. And you know, Facebook has a reputation uh, in where reptile groups tie in to be kind of somewhat toxic energy places where people are
Mhm.
just argue over the littlest things, and no, I'm right, no, it's got to be like this, oh, you're not doing that right, rather more so than places of information and knowledge and people helping each other. That's not what's typically encountered, sadly. And I'm in a couple Facebook groups mostly dealing with rodents and local area advertisements of creatures and equipment, more so than anything else. And but I have friends in this hobby. I hear news. This is a news-based show. I'm listening. And apparently Darian Drollinger, the owner of Morph Market, has come out with his new line of cages. He's opened a new store, with like a vivarium, reptarium type of feel and inspiration to it that he's drawn from other places. I'm sure, that he's visited and modeled it somewhat after. And he's been giving away a lot of cages via Facebook. And sometimes when he offers those as giveaways, I've been like, hey, I'll take one. Maybe I'll get a blue tongue skink and put it in it. I don't know. I mean, I have cages. I don't really need them, but giveaways are fun. And he has like some sponsorship arrangements, and he has something worked out with Adam Wickens, and he sent him a cage to test out and to use and to showcase, I'm sure, in videos. And Adam nicely set it up with branches and different substrates and looks a little bit more like a woodland cage than like a deserty cage, but I haven't like seen it in person. And it looked nice. Multiple hides and different, temperature things. Like I think Adam has a reputation and has proven over the years of his YouTube success and sharing of information to know how to take care of reptiles pretty well, and has a lot of friends and contacts that also do very well with reptiles. And he decided to put a 1.5 of leopard geckos in it and share that in a video showcasing the sponsored product. And if it wasn't for apparently a lot of people whining about the amount of geckos in the space, which is a very, very large cage. I've never kept leopard geckos in a cage so large. I've had, you know, some 40 gallons, but mostly leopard geckos do pretty well in a 20-gallon long. That's standard in the hobby. And yeah, there was some backlash that was generating because people like to argue over how you best take care of geckos. And um, Darian was getting, from what I've heard and from what I've seen Darian post online, complaints to his store about the video and felt impelled to like not want to be involved with that drama and disagreement from people and any slight negativity or anything. He wanted to kind of separate himself from that because they sell to a lot of new keepers in the hobby through that store and with offer those cages and just wanted to let it be known, hey, like don't be upset with me. People can do whatever they want with the cages that I send them, but basically took a stance, kind of a firm stance on that's not the way he agrees that leopard geckos should be responsibly kept in that amount of space. And like it just like billowed from there on various online forums and probably on YouTube as well, and of course toxic Facebook groups. People want to like choose sides. Hey, because some people know that they've kept various species of geckos in groups, and then other people know that they've only kept them individually in rack systems, which isn't really my style for geckos, but is how a lot of things are kept nowadays. And you can keep a lot of geckos very healthy in rack systems. I mean, the gecko I showed today, she's in, she's in a she's in a snake rack, but that was just temporary from when I got her, and I have a whole cage just feet away right here that is a front opening equivalent of like an Exoterra. It's got like a whole bunch of like options like a heat pad, it's got LED lights, it's got ceramic heat emitter, it's got all sorts of stuff ready to go. I just put that there last week on a little stand, and we haven't set it up yet. We're just taking our time because I want it to be kind of epic. I want there to have like little tunnel systems, and I got excavator clay, which I haven't used in so many years, and we're discussing: are we going to use foam and then chip away and carve away at it and put silicone, put the crushed like granite and different things like that. I don't know. We haven't completely decided how we're gonna decorate it, and I don't have any like air plants. I do have some succulents that I got from like the last Pomona show and from some people, but I'm just taking my time. I want it to be really cool, and yeah, so you can just feel the negativity in the hobby when people just jump on, somebody. And sometimes people need to be called out in this industry. Sometimes people are doing horrible things. Like I lose a massive amount of respect to bullies, or like people that harm others, or abuse animals. Like um but sometimes people will jump on the smallest things and make a big deal out of it. And it feels like that, because sparked from Darian taking such a hard stance on it, that people started like choosing sides and making a big deal about it. And I've seen all sorts of comments and opinions. Everybody's got an opinion. And you know, I I feel, Mark, all right, like reptiles have been kept in America for longer than either you or I have been alive. And, more so in the 80s, and then obviously more so in the 90s, and the booms that we've mentioned before. And there's so many keepers now, and there's so much knowledge has been gained, and people have learned how to better take care of stuff. But like I in my time, and from breeders I've talked to, like there's been a lot of people that have kept geckos somewhat communally. Now, when it comes to geckos, anything in Geckonidae family, like there's so many different types of geckos. Like typically, typically, Mark, like you don't really want mature male geckos of any species, really, in general, to hang out very long. They are territorial, they are feisty. A lot of people, they'll breed a species and they'll raise all the babies together. Like for instance, just pick one, day geckos. Like I've bred uh, gold dust day geckos. You'll find them not just in Madagascar,
Very
but
cool.
also they were introduced in Hawaii. Um, and lined or peacock day geckos. And I've kept lots of giant green day geckos, essentially the gecko gecko. Sometimes people wonder, well, what kind of gecko is the gecko gecko? Well, he's from Madagascar. He's a day gecko of whatever variety. Um, but that's for sure why he has like an British accent and he lives in Madagascar. I'm not sure, but that's fine. But you'll usually, a lot of times, you'll take on somebody's stock, and you'll like, especially if you got all the hatchlings from someone, maybe like like four unsexed hatchlings, right? From a couple hatchings of eggs. Like you'll take those on and you'll raise them up and hope that you get like a girl, and you raise them up and you raise them up and together, and they get to a certain size, and then you can start to sex them. You start to determine like behaviors and things, and maybe one's stronger than the other, and maybe you got to separate one. But there's lots of gecko species, and I'm just saying this like broadly, that you can keep semi communally, like in small groups, totally fine. It's been it's been going on for decades. It's nothing new. Everyone's used to like snakes in these racks, and you shouldn't keep, certain snakes together. Some snakes will just reliably kill each other, or they'll be stressed out, or now you should just keep all geckos in a rack and they should all be separate forever. And it's like, well, how did any of these species of geckos ever mate if they were never cohabbed? Like, that's my biggest thing. Like, okay, so when is it okay with people to cohab geckos? Like, they meet in the wild now. Many species, from researchers and field herpers, wherever, North America, wherever, Australia, leopard geckos, they come from Pakistan and Turkey and India. Like, they go and they find stuff in the wild, and they take notes, and there have been geckos found in small groupings in the wild. And then, I'm sure for the safety of any pet that you have at home, like sure, you keep it by itself. It's going to eliminate a lot of potential issues and stresses. And I mean, I'd be a little bit bored maybe, and that's why you want to try to provide enrichment to whatever reptile it is that you keep. But you don't want a gecko to lose toes, to lose a
Mhm.
tail. Like I've seen a lot of injuries. I've seen, people that have kept, various species together. But on a smaller, reasonable level, most of the gecko species that I've kept and bred over the years and the people that I've, formed, relationships with and learned from and the species that they've kept in past decades keep geckos of most species in like 1.2 or 1.3 groups, and definitely in pairs as long as there's no problems. Now, Rhacodactylus species, they've been kept in groups since the late 90s with very very little issues. Most of the issues that they have that show up come from breeding, lack of calcium from that, uh, laying upside down and getting like tail floppiness conditions and different things, more so than like attacking each other. But if you were to just take every species of gecko, right, and you're just to keep them all in giant communal groups with lots of space, but just in like an overabundance, right? You would have and find and see a lot of issues and a lot of fighting and a lot of injuries and a lot of deaths. But I view it as the likelihood that he was more so just showing what a cage was capable of doing. I imagine, Mr. Wickens, and he set that up, and he has experience with the species, and I'm sure he's like watching them closely and doesn't have, any desire for any of them to get hurt. It might even just be a temporary thing that he was showing just to like showcase, the cage and potentials of it. Um, I have never kept a 1.5, to be fair, of leopard geckos. I just think that's a bit much. But some of these big leopard gecko breeders, Mark, over the decades, as they became a very, very popular pet in the late 90s and into early 2000s, it just absolutely exploded on the cover of all sorts of magazines and
Mhm.
at all the pet stores. And they breed so fast and they breed so easy, and they got prettier and prettier and prettier, and just gained in popularity. And, a lot of these big name breeders, in order to produce the numbers to supply, wholesale to like distributors to then, be shot out to pet stores and to go all over the country, would keep their geckos in very large groups, larger than I than I would than I would keep. But that was kind of my hope, was to talk with some of those breeders. Now, this is a sensitive and slightly controversial topic, and so you want to really discuss it and be fair. And I thought that I would reach out to some of the bigger breeders in the hobby and in the past, and some of them are people that happen to have done business with many, 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 many years ago. So I listened to some podcasts and tried to gauge of what I've heard from the old timers, and then I emailed and attempted to phone and contact Ron Tremper, who was a big, big name breeder of leopard geckos decades ago and was very successful. I mean, you have the Tremper albino leopard
Mhm.
gecko, and that's when they first came out. I remember the craze of albino leopard geckos when they first became like reasonably attainable was the most exciting and anticipated thing in my time in the reptile hobby. Like
Yep.
it was like everybody wanted one. I was buying them in as many groups as I could. I'd buy. Some people would sell me 5, some people would sell me 10. Some people, no, oh no, you have to buy 20 of them, or I'm going to sell them to this distributor, or that's the only way you're going to get this price. And I would buy as many as I could afford, and then I would, I'd get money from other people if I couldn't quite afford it, and then I'd let them pick, like, whatever the nicest one, and then, I'd buy and sell. I did a lot of trading back then. I worked at pet stores, and I wanted albino leopard geckos so bad, and I wanted other people to enjoy them, and it's just a wonderful species. And so I tried to contact him, and you can't always get a hold of somebody, in one day, or let's just say like 6 days time, and since our last podcast, like, um, and I could not get a hold of him, but I did get a return email from one Julie Bergman of Gecko Ranch, and I have purchased lizards from her in years past, knobtail geckos, and she has like awesome day geckos and panther geckos and viper geckos, all sorts of things. I would see her at shows, and she stuck with it year after year after year after year after year. And she's preparing to go to Tinley currently, as are lots of people that watch this show. And she said that Ron was traveling and would probably, I tried to articulate a very respectful, request to speak with him. And she said, I'm sure he would love this email, and I'm sure he would love to talk to you, but he is unavailable currently. How it is that she takes care of all the emails for him, I don't know. It is very ironic that I've met her in person in the Northern California reptile scene, 20 years ago. But she's really nice, and she's just so knowledgeable on lizards. And she said that just try back another time. That it would be a very fun topic to touch on, albeit somewhat controversial, and that she would love to come on the show and discuss her gecko experience if we ever have a gecko episode here. So we have that, open to us. And I also tried to contact uh, Adam Wickens of Wickens Wicked Reptiles. He's a busy, big name YouTuber, and he's had all this, I imagine, headache lately, partially brought on himself, but just this whole thing that's blown up when he's just trying to do, you know, right by reptiles, and feature stuff and educate people. It's kind of turned into this, thing, and I've never spoken with him before. I don't watch very many of his videos. I'm familiar with who he is. I've watched some of his stuff, but it's not really
Same.
content that I gravitate towards. But I know who he is, and he's done a good job of building a YouTube brand, and that's cool. But he did not return my email, and he did not message me back on Instagram because he is currently on vacation in Cuba. So, timing is everything, Mark. And so I spoke with Darian Drollinger, owner of Morph Market, and I have a dialogue with him. I'm friends with him on Facebook. Some people give him a hard time, and some of the stuff he's done I don't exactly agree with. I'm sure some of the stuff he's done you don't exactly agree with, but like he has put in a ton of money, energy, and time into improving Morph Market. I see more
Agree.
going on with Morph Market than what I had seen since I had joined. Not that there was anything wrong with it before, but it's going to evolve, and it's going to the next steps. And I mean, I would like to see a trading spot, so where people that, like, you don't have to bug them to trade something. Some people say, like, yeah, it says like you have the option, like, willing to listen or whatever, right? But lots of people don't, they just want money. And so I feel like when we're in this kind of time frame where the economy is kind of rough, and people want new stuff but don't have lots of money, and some people want to get rid of stuff but they can't sell it. Well, then, like, trading's a pretty good option for everybody. And if there was a spot that was just like a trading section, then it would be more upfront that, hey, I'm will like, I don't know if I want what you have, but hey, I'm willing to offer some of these things for trade, so it's mutually beneficial. Like, that's the next thing that I would like to see added to Morph Market. But I spoke with Darian. I invited him on the show after I talked to you about it, to make sure that you would be interested. We spoke about it. I spoke about it with him. He said he would be very interested. I don't want to say he's going to be on in a certain date and then have that not come true. So let's just say tentatively, that's the words that I used even with him. In the near future, it's highly likely that we will have the owner of Morph Market on our podcast. So I would like to talk to him about all sorts of other stuff more so than other little dramas. But sometimes, Mark, and when these kinds of things happen, it's totally resolvable. You can squash these little, like, fires and pour a little bit of water on them. Like, it's really not that big a deal that it's become newsworthy. And I'm more of the opinion that, like, it's best to just talk things out and be willing to admit maybe where you're wrong. Maybe this wasn't preferable. Maybe this wasn't a good look. Hey, maybe, yeah, maybe, maybe you're right about that. I will take that in. I'm going to consider that. Hey, I didn't mean any harm. I certainly didn't mean any harm to the animals or to anybody listening or viewing. Like, that's a better approach than to just be like, meh, geckos, you should do this, you should do that, you should never do. I'm an expert. Like, how many of those people actually watched Adam's video? How many of those people have actually kept a leopard gecko or any gecko for 10, 15, 20 years? My first leopard gecko lived over 2 decades. That's older than the oldest cat that I've had, and I've had cats live like 18 plus years. Like, you gain a certain amount of, like, knowledge and, like, appreciation and perspective when you keep something in a dedicated manner. And I certainly am not gonna, like, blast other people for keeping cobras. Now, maybe don't put it in a room full of youngsters, right? Have no experience with venomous creatures. Maybe Gila monsters are not for everyone. Maybe they are illegal in most states for a reason. They're protected in their range. They're certainly cool. I would love to see one in the wild. Um, in the right circumstance, hiking somewhere, I probably would be likely to pick one up and check it out and take that risk. I've held rattlesnakes before, not for fun and, like, because I was drunk or something, but maybe I was fishing. I've fished before in Northern California, and rattlesnakes would just come through the water up to you, like fishing, sitting on the, like, little pebble beach. And I they have there's this myth, right? I don't know if it goes back to, like, Native Americans, but like, there's this myth that rattlesnakes, and it probably applies to other pit type vipers around the world, in different cultures, that their eyes are so hypnotic, Mark. They're just like,
Hmm.
remember, like, in the Robin Hood cartoon, like, that little snake was just, like, doing the, like, little eye thing, and he was hypnotizing. I used to love that cartoon. And they have, like, such a beautiful eye and look to them that it just makes you want to get a little bit closer. And, like, you can't help it. And that's how lots of people have gotten bit. And then a lot of times people are, like, stupid. But Um, yeah, I had a friend who was the reptile rescue for Sonoma County in Northern California, and he had, like, every type of rattlesnake in his house, and he would do educational, like, shows, and do demonstrations at schools and different things. If I remember correctly, he's been bitten 7 times. Mm, he has anti venom in his, in his supply, and it's gotten very expensive over the years. And the doctors have told him, if you get bit by a rattlesnake one more time, you're gonna you're gonna have some problems. And some people will swear that you're gonna gain some sort of immunity, right?
Hmm.
Like it's some sort of Egyptian like theory or whatever. But really, your body can only take so much, and it's best not to get envenomated by creatures, lizards or snakes. But yeah, I try to do my best to get a hold of some people to kind of try to touch on that little saga and squash it and kind of just like be, open and transparent with it and just like, hey, this is what happened, whatever, and discuss geckos because geckos certainly have not been kept in captivity only in a solitary manner since the 60s. That's not how it's worked. So, everybody choosing sides and getting all over Adam's case for maybe not the best look with a sponsored equipment item, but like you need to put stuff in perspective. How much do you really know about geckos?
Hmm.
How much are you just getting, you these people, right, or just getting upset because it's something to get upset about in a crowd mentality? And I saw Ty Park, who is the owner of Iguana Land.
Hmm.
Like my first ever reptile was a green iguana. He's 70 years old. I spoke with him about this because he had put a post on Facebook being like, "Hey, everybody, chill out, dude, chill out." Like Adam is not a bad guy, and like relax, like. And I told him that we would discuss it a little bit, not for like drama ratings or something, but just education and something. It is newsworthy. It's thought provoking. It is a topic, and he's I invited him on the show, and he's like he's such a nice guy. He has a stellar reputation throughout the country with what he's contributed to the hobby, and he was like, yeah, no, I'm older. I'm not about no drama. I was like, well, I just wanted to like talk about stuff. I just wanted to talk about stuff. You have so much experience, and just to like more squash things and be reasonable with people from a standpoint of like experience and people sharing like what they've learned in their time and um, but yeah, he wasn't about that, but he was appreciative of the invite, and we'll just have to wait, unfortunately, to get the perspective of some of those, level guests, and we'll just see. We'll just see. My take on the topic, Mark, is just that geckos aren't necessarily meant to only be, cared for their whole life just as individuals in tubs or in cages. Like, it's okay to research and talk to big name people and big name breeders that have more experience than your average hobbyist and see what you can responsibly get away with in housing geckos in small groups. Like there's some species of geckos that I've never had fight any more than relationships with people. Like day geckos to an extent do pretty well in small groups. There's lots of places to hide. You give them lots of bamboo, cork bark tubes, and put them in big enough cages to have thermal gradients. And I've found a lot of the like um, geckos to the south of us, like Ecuador and Panama, and like a lot of the Madagascar ground geckos, like panthers, m- more known as like pictus geckos. They used to be called big head geckos. Like I used to keep them in big groups, import them, from the wild, and try to breed for stripes or breed for hypomelanism. Um, and I never ever had a pictus gecko hurt one another. But everything is like is like different tiers of how experienced you are as a keeper and herpiculturist, like to what you can get away with and to what is responsible. There's people that have leeches that are killing each other every year. There's a guy at the last couple shows that I went to, and he had this pair of leeches, and they never seemed to really hit it off. And then I seen him at the last show, right? And I'm like, hey, did you finally like breed your leeches? Because they're plenty big enough. And he's like, well, what happened is like, uh, she killed him. I was like, oh man. So that happens. That happens more regularly with certain species, especially lychees. And yeah, they're just too strong and too rough with each other. And so everything is in context. Some things get along great, and some things are just like you're not gonna if we went to every island in New Caledonia and we checked every single tree and we looked for all the lychees, we'd probably only find a couple instances from, overturning every rock and log, so to speak, of them being cuddled together because they're like set pairs like penguins, or we happen to catch them breeding. They tend to be solitary animals, and you can get pairs to bond. You can raise them, and some people have had great success with certain ones, and some people have had great success for many years with lychees, and then one day one of them is dead, or severely injured. And they all these different species have different evolutionary ways of how they deal with some of that kind of stuff from what they encounter crossing paths with another critter in the wild. I used to have uh, frog eye geckos. They
Mhm.
have like they look like they have fish scales all over them, and there's multiple species of them that are similar looking to each other. Some of them are a little bigger than others. There's not as many of them out now as it used to be. Like in the 90s, you could just go to Petco and get them, but they're really interesting. And their skin mark, it just rips away. It just falls off when they bite each other aggressively. It just
Wow.
it just looks like raw chicken, and it's kind of scary looking when you see it, but it just heals right up, and it's like they're designed that way. Lychees also, I've seen vicious wounds from people in pictures and images, and then like within months, it was just like healed up reasonably well. Where you're like, wow, that's crazy. It's a little bit Wolverine, but that's kind of just my take on it. Is like I don't totally watch lots of Adam Wicken's content, but I certainly don't view him as a bad keeper of reptiles. That's for certain. And I'll never keep a 1.5 of leopard geckos, but I could see it being done because people have done it before. It wasn't maybe not the best route to take publicly, but give the guy a break, man. And everybody beating up Darian, like, dude, everywhere you go, everything that you're involved in, the higher up you get, all the way to like Donald Trump, like presidential status. And I didn't vote for Donald Trump, and I don't care about politics. I try to kind of stay out of it. But like the higher up you go, the point is that like the more you're a target for others. So if you're super famous because you're an actor, people all the time, I hate Leonardo DiCaprio. Oh, that guy, he looks so stupid. Oh, like he's terrible. Man, whatever. You're just jealous. Like, is he this like great guy? I don't know. I've never met him. From what I can tell, he seems all right. He's a pretty dang good actor. But like, you will get more hate. The bigger of a YouTube name that you have, the bigger of a breeder name in the hobby that you have, the higher up you go in rank at wherever your job is, people will look at you different, you know. And Darian gets a lot of flack. He draws some of that on himself. I tell him to his face, like, like, why'd you say that? But like, he is like, he is funny. He has a sense of humor. I like him. I think he's made vast improvements at a much faster scale with the site that is Morph Market, that people should be a little bit more grateful for, I feel, in this hobby, because it helps them sell stuff. Like, if you have such a problem with Darien, why don't you go back to like kingsnake.com, see how many snakes you sell? You go back to Craigslist. you
On
know it
lines.
right? It's, yeah, everybody needs to like chill a little bit. I mean, there's people that do stuff in the hobby that I don't agree with. That I guess sometimes I get upset at certain little things. I'm like, hey, look at this jerk. But like, I just do my own thing, man. I just try to help people. I try to be funny with it too, and I think that's what Darian gets a lot of flack for. He puts himself out there a lot, and he's a little bit opinionated, and sometimes he's just trying to tell a joke. He's just trying to lighten the mood, and not everybody has the same sense of humor, and um and that's unfortunate, but I'm grateful that, some people are really reasonable, and some people are real fun. Some people are real funny, and um, you know, I like to interact with those kind of people. I would love it if Darian came on the show and he could tell us more about roaches and experiences in the hobby, because he's seen a lot of stuff. And I think if people learned, and we can ask him about this, you can come up with a whole list of questions, Mark, and we can get a lot of curiosities understood with, like, it's got to be really hard to run Morph Market. How many complaints does the troubleshooting team get daily from people whining about this or whining about that, or unrealistic about this or that? Um, Not everybody is reasonable. One of among my more favorite people in the hobby, because of his story and because of his ethics, and he's pretty funny too, is Bob Vu. That's why I got him,
Mhm.
tattoo of Bob's balls on my calf, and sadly, the creator originally of uh, Dragon Ball Z
Yeah.
passed away. That's sad whenever really interesting creative people, you know, pass away. That like Stan Lee with Marvel, all the inspiring, and the imagination that comic books and cartoons, like, you know give to people, is something that makes the world a better place. So when those people are gone, it's pretty sad. But I forgot what my point was. I mentioned Bob.
Well, let's wrap it up here soon, Jason.
Oh yeah, yeah. We've been ranting. Oh, it's a long one. Yeah. So yeah. It's those are the topics for the day. Be careful with venomous reptiles, and research the ones that you do have, especially in the gecko realm, if you're hoping to keep, more than one or two together.
As usual, Jason, thank you for your thoroughness, and I really hope that Darian does come on to our show at some point,
Hmm.
because I do have a lot of questions related to Morph Market, and it would be a really good interview. So hopefully that happens soon.
Hopefully, we'll see. It's in the works.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching the show. Really appreciate it. We'll be back again next week with a great topic as usual. See
Yes,
you
we
later,
will.
everybody.
You have a great night, everyone.
Thanks again, Jason. You're awesome.